The sirens pierced through the humid Florida night like a knife cutting through silence. Emergency room doors burst open as paramedics wheeled in a man whose screams echoed down the hospital corridors. Michael Thompson, a 42-year-old mechanic from Tampa, was fighting for his life against something that was literally eating him alive from the inside out. His flesh was turning black, rotting away as if some invisible monster was devouring him piece by piece. The doctors who rushed to save him had seen car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses, but nothing had prepared them for what they witnessed that night. One nurse would later say she could smell death creeping through his skin. But here's what makes this story truly terrifying. This wasn't random. This wasn't an accident. And the woman who may have caused it all was sitting calmly in the waiting room, watching the chaos unfold with an expression that chilled everyone who saw it. What doctors discovered inside Michael's body would challenge everything they thought they knew about trust, intimacy, and the deadly secrets people carry. Because sometimes the person lying next to you in bed is carrying something far worse than a broken heart.
Dark Stories. True crime is your home for chilling crimes, unsolved mysteries, and the darkest secrets the world has to offer. We uncover shocking cases, disturbing truths, and mysterious disappearances. Hit subscribe and join us.
Michael Thompson wasn't supposed to end up as a medical mystery that would haunt doctors for years to come. He was just a regular guy trying to rebuild his life after a messy divorce, working long hours at Jimmy's auto repair in Tampa, coming home to an empty apartment that still smelled faintly of his ex-wife's perfume. At 42, Michael thought his best days were behind him until he met someone online who promised to change everything. Her name was Carla Williams, and she would become the most dangerous woman he'd ever encounter. Carla wasn't your typical dating app profile. At nearly 400 pounds, she was larger than life in every sense, with a personality that could fill a room and stories that kept Michael talking until 3 in the morning. She claimed to understand him in ways his ex-wife never did, promised to show him pleasures he'd never experienced, and spoke about their future together with a confidence that was both thrilling and somehow unsettling. But beneath her charming exterior, Carla was carrying secrets that could kill. The questions that would consume investigators for months were simple, yet terrifying. Was Michael's near-death experience a tragic accident that could happen to anyone? Or was he deliberately targeted by a woman who used her own body as a weapon? And most disturbing of all, who really was Carla Williams? And how many other men had crossed her path before Michael Thompson fought for his life on that operating table? To understand how Michael Thompson ended up rotting from the inside out, you need to understand the man he was before that terrible night. After his divorce from Sarah, a marriage that had lasted 12 years before crumbling under the weight of financial stress and his drinking problem, Michael had spent 2 years in isolation. His friends at the auto shop watched him sink deeper into loneliness, eating microwave dinners alone while scrolling through his phone, looking for something, anything, to fill the void Sarah had left behind. His sister Jenny would call every Sunday, begging him to get back out there, to try dating again. But Michael had lost faith in love entirely. That's what made Carla so dangerous. She appeared in his life at exactly the moment when he was most vulnerable, most desperate for human connection. Their first conversation on a dating app lasted 6 hours. Michael would later tell his friend Danny that talking to Carla felt like coming home after years of wandering in the dark. She laughed at his jokes, understood his fears about getting older alone, and promised him adventures that would make him forget every disappointing night he'd spent since his divorce. But there were warning signs that Michael, blinded by loneliness, chose to ignore. Carla refused to video chat, claiming her camera was broken. She wouldn't give him her home address, saying she was renovating and the place was a mess. When they finally met for coffee at a diner near Tampa Bay, Michael was struck not just by her size, but by the way she ate. She consumed food with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, as if she was trying to fill some endless void inside herself. She ordered 3 entrees and finished them all while talking about her past relationships with a coldness that should have sent him running. She described her ex-boyfriends like specimens she'd studied rather than men she'd loved. But Michael was so starved for affection that he interpreted her obsessive attention as passion. When Carla suggested they take their relationship to the next level, when she invited him to spend the night at a hotel room she'd booked, Michael thought he was finally getting his second chance at happiness. His friend Danny would later testify that Michael had called him that afternoon, excited as a teenager before prom, saying Carla was different, that she understood him in ways no one else ever had. Danny tried to warn him that something felt off about this woman, but Michael was already too far gone to listen. That decision to trust her would nearly cost him everything. The night that changed Michael Thompson's life forever began innocently enough at the Palm Court Hotel, a modest establishment on Tampa's outskirts where Carla had booked a room with cash. She arrived carrying a small cooler and several bags from a pharmacy, explaining to Michael that she had special dietary needs and medications that required refrigeration. The red flags were there, but Michael was so focused on finally having intimacy after 2 years of loneliness that he ignored the warning signs screaming in his head. Carla insisted on keeping the lights off, claiming she was self-conscious about her body, but Michael could sense there was something more to her reluctance. In the darkness, he couldn't see the strange, powdery residue on her hands, couldn't notice the way she seemed to be applying something to her skin before their intimate moments together. She offered him drinks she'd brought in her cooler, homemade smoothies she claimed would increase his stamina, and Michael, eager to please and perform well, consumed them without question. The liquid had a metallic taste that lingered in his mouth, but when he mentioned it, Carla kissed him and told him it was just protein powder. What happened next would haunt Michael for the rest of his life, though he would remember very little of it clearly. He recalled Carla being unusually aggressive, almost predatory in her approach to intimacy. There were moments when he felt like prey being consumed rather than a lover being cherished. He remembered strange sensations, a burning that he initially attributed to passion, but would later realize was something far more sinister taking hold of his body. By morning, he was running a fever and complaining of pain in places that shouldn't have been hurting. Carla seemed strangely energized by his discomfort, watching him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. When Michael suggested they grab breakfast together, she claimed she had a family emergency and needed to leave immediately. She packed her bags with mechanical efficiency, avoiding eye contact, and left Michael alone in that hotel room with a pain that was growing worse by the hour. Within 6 hours of her departure, Michael was on the floor of his apartment, screaming in agony as his neighbor called 911. The paramedics who arrived found him unconscious, his skin already beginning to show the telltale signs of necrosis that would nearly kill him. The emergency room at Tampa General Hospital had seen its share of medical mysteries, but what arrived with Michael Thompson that September evening baffled even the most experienced physicians. Dr. Patricia Martinez, who had been treating patients for over 20 years, would later describe Michael's condition as unlike anything in her medical training. His flesh was dying at an alarming rate, turning black and literally dissolving before their eyes. The smell was overwhelming, a combination of decay and chemicals that made several nurses physically ill. Initially, doctors suspected drug poisoning or a severe allergic reaction, but toxicology reports came back negative for common substances. As they fought to save Michael's life, removing dead tissue and pumping him full of antibiotics, investigators began piecing together the events of the previous night. Detective Sarah Chen was assigned to what initially appeared to be a potential attempted murder case, but the evidence she uncovered would prove far stranger than anyone anticipated. The hotel staff remembered Carla Williams clearly, not just for her size, but for her unusual behavior. The cleaning crew reported finding the room in an abnormal state, with strange stains on the sheets that seemed to burn their hands when touched without gloves. The hotel manager provided security footage that showed Carla leaving the building at 6:47 a.m., carrying her cooler and bags with the same mechanical precision witnesses would describe again and again. But when investigators tried to trace her, they hit dead end after dead end. The phone number Carla had given Michael was disconnected. The address she'd provided led to a vacant lot. Her dating profile had been deleted, and the credit card she'd used for the hotel room traced back to a fake identity. It was as if Carla Williams had simply vanished into thin air, leaving only Michael's rotting flesh as evidence she'd ever existed. But Detective Chen's investigation was just beginning, and what she would discover about this mysterious woman would shock everyone involved in the case, including the hardened investigators who thought they'd seen everything in their years of police work. The media attention was immediate and brutal. Local news stations ran with headlines like "Tampa Man Nearly Dies After Mystery Hotel Encounter" and "Flesh-Eating Disease Strikes After Date Gone Wrong." Michael's family was bombarded with interview requests, and his ex-wife Sarah called the hospital in tears, guilt-ridden about their divorce and desperate to help however she could. But as medical experts struggled to understand how Michael had contracted such a severe case of necrotizing fasciitis, Detective Chen was following a trail that would lead to discoveries that would make this case legendary in Florida law enforcement circles. Detective Sarah Chen's breakthrough came 3 weeks into the investigation when she decided to expand her search beyond Florida state lines. Using the physical description provided by hotel staff and Michael's fragmented memories, she began checking with hospitals in neighboring states for similar cases of unexplained flesh-eating infections. What she found would turn this case from a local mystery into a multi-state manhunt that involved the FBI and infectious disease specialists from the CDC. Over the past 7 years, at least 12 men across Florida, Georgia, and Alabama had been hospitalized with severe necrotizing fasciitis after intimate encounters with a woman matching Carla Williams's description. The pattern was always the same. A lonely, recently divorced man would meet an extremely overweight woman online, spend one night with her, and within hours would be fighting for his life against a flesh-eating infection that doctors couldn't immediately identify or treat effectively. 3 of these men had died. 4 others, including Michael, had survived but required extensive amputations and reconstructive surgeries. The breakthrough came when investigators finally tracked down Carla's real identity through a DNA sample recovered from the hotel room. Her real name was Carla Greene Martinez, and her background was more disturbing than anyone had imagined. 7 years earlier, she had worked as a quality control technician at Biotech Solutions, a pharmaceutical research facility outside Atlanta that specialized in developing treatments for antibiotic-resistant infections. During her employment there, the facility had reported several security breaches involving the theft of experimental bacterial cultures, including several strains of Vibrio vulnificus, the same bacteria that had nearly killed Michael Thompson. The FBI discovered that Carla had been dismissed from biotech after colleagues reported her unusual behavior around the bacterial samples and her disturbing comments about using the organisms to teach men lessons they'll never forget. A former co-worker named Patricia Ruiz told investigators that Carla had spoken obsessively about controlling men through fear and pain, claiming that most men deserved to suffer for the way they treated women. She had apparently spent years perfecting her method of delivery, using her own body as a vehicle for bacterial transmission during intimate encounters. Medical experts were horrified by the sophistication of Carla's method. She had somehow found a way to culture and maintain the bacteria within her own body, creating what infectious disease specialist Dr. Michael Patterson called a living biological weapon. The bacteria could survive on her skin for extended periods, and her homemade drinks contained additional cultures that would establish the infection internally. Michael Thompson hadn't just been the victim of a crime. He'd been the subject of a deadly experiment conducted by a woman who had turned serial killing into a twisted science project. The manhunt for Carla Greene Martinez ended 6 months later in a trailer park outside Pensacola, Florida, where she had been living under the name Rebecca Thompson and working at a local seafood processing plant. When FBI agents arrested her, they found her small living space converted into a makeshift laboratory, complete with refrigeration units containing bacterial cultures and detailed notes documenting the effects of her infections on previous victims. The journals she kept revealed a mind consumed by hatred for men and a scientific curiosity about human suffering that chilled even experienced investigators. During interrogation, Carla showed no remorse for her actions, but insisted that she had never intended to kill anyone. She claimed her goal was to educate men about consequences, and that the deaths were unfortunate side effects of her experiment. She spoke about her victims with the clinical detachment of a researcher discussing lab rats, describing their symptoms and recovery rates as if she were presenting findings at a medical conference. When asked about Michael Thompson specifically, she expressed frustration that he had survived, noting that his immune system had been stronger than she had anticipated. The trial of Carla Greene Martinez became a media sensation that exposed gaps in how the medical community tracked and investigated unusual disease outbreaks. Prosecutors charged her with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 14 counts of attempted murder, presenting evidence that she had deliberately weaponized dangerous bacteria to harm the men she targeted. The defense attempted to argue that she was mentally ill and unable to understand the consequences of her actions, but forensic psychologists testified that her detailed planning and scientific methodology demonstrated clear premeditation and understanding of the harm she was causing. Michael Thompson testified at the trial, his body bearing the permanent scars of his encounter with Carla. He had lost his left arm below the elbow and required multiple skin grafts to repair the damage to his torso and legs. His testimony was devastating as he described not just the physical agony he endured, but the psychological trauma of learning that someone he had trusted with his body had deliberately tried to destroy him. He spoke about the nightmares, the fear of intimacy, and the way this experience had shattered his ability to trust anyone completely. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all counts. Carla Greene Martinez was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, but the judge's final words would haunt everyone in that courtroom. He noted that this case represented a new kind of crime that law enforcement and medical professionals were unprepared to handle, a warning that in an age of advanced biotechnology and easy access to dangerous materials, anyone with sufficient knowledge and hatred could become a walking weapon of mass destruction. The story of Michael Thompson and Carla Greene Martinez forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the world we live in and the people we choose to trust. This wasn't just a Florida crime story or a cautionary tale about online dating. This was a glimpse into a future where the line between intimacy and bioterrorism has become terrifyingly thin, where a person's body can be weaponized in ways that challenge our most basic assumptions about human connection and safety. Michael survived, but he's never been the same. He returned to work at the auto shop, but his colleagues say he's withdrawn, cautious in ways that go beyond normal skepticism. He's had to rebuild not just his damaged body, but his entire understanding of what it means to trust another human being. His sister Jenny reports that he still has nightmares about that night at the Palm Court Hotel, dreams where he's being consumed by something he can't see or fight. The physical scars have healed as much as they ever will, but the psychological wounds remain raw years later. As you've listened to this story, you've probably asked yourself the same questions that haunted investigators throughout this case. How could someone carry such deadly secrets while appearing completely normal? What warning signs might have saved Michael if he'd been paying attention? And most disturbing of all, how many other people like Carla Martinez are out there, carrying invisible weapons and waiting for the right victim to come along? Think about your own relationships, your own dating experiences, and the people you've trusted with your most vulnerable moments. Would you have seen the red flags that Michael missed? Would you have questioned those homemade drinks, insisted on keeping the lights on, or walked away when something felt off? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, but more importantly, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because the next Michael Thompson could be someone you care about, and awareness might be the only thing standing between them and a nightmare they'll never fully wake up from. Click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos, because the stories we uncover will change how you see the world around you forever.